Today on Earth Focus, killing wolves. Stripped of federal protection, Rocky Mountain wolves face a new battle for survival. Can hunters, ranchers, and conservationists find a way to live with wolves? Coming up on Earth Focus.
People hate wolves because I think they see them as a threat to their livelihood.
Wolf's a pretty good killer. We've had yearlings killed, big yearlings killed.
There's only a few places on the planet that have made accommodations for wolves, and we're one of them.
To some extent in this area, wolves represent government taking a misstep, government gone wrong.
The removal of wolves from the federal endangered species list was done very poorly.
Wolves will survive right along with ranchers, and it won't be easy, but I think it is that opportunity.
The wolves were reintroduced in 1995 and 96. It was done in 2 phases. There were plans for future reintroductions if necessary, but the wolves took to Yellowstone right away. It took decades of work to bring them back here. And we're in the 18th year of our research program and having wolves back on the land. And we've been studying them ever since the beginning. To me, wolves mean wildness and wild nature. You know, we are losing so much of our connection as an American society to what our wildlife heritage is. And wolves are at the core of that. So we know it's a female, and we've got the upper jaw here, and then here's the lower mandible. And one of the first things I notice about this is it's an extremely old cow, okay? You see a lot of tooth wear here. If this were a young cow, these teeth, these crowns would be high, they'd be up here at this level, and you can see they're worn almost down to the gum line. This is a very old cow. So this is a cow elk that lived a long time in the Yellowstone ecosystem, and you know, she's lived for the last 18 years, so she's lived and survived with wolves. If you actually look at elk herds around the states of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, there's very healthy elk herds. They're either at or above objectives for elk. Wolves aren't causing wide-scale decimation of elk herds around the states. You might have times when wolves cause elk herds to decline and take hunting opportunities away from people. And we have to come to whether or not if that's acceptable to us as a society to have that balance.
We're just finishing out the back of a mount here, staining and coloring. There's competitiveness in everybody, and everybody wants to be the best in the world. And there's a lot of taxidermists out here in Montana. Some of them have won world titles out here. It's a good state for taxidermy. Hunting is a big part of our economy out here, and it's gradually gotten bad. We're competing with too many predators now. The wolves, the mountain lions, and the grizzly bears. We used to do over 100 elk a year. Now we're down to around 40. And a lot of mine are coming from other parts of the state where the wolves aren't. The moose and stuff you see come out of Alaska now instead of out of the canyon here. There's not that many to go around anymore. There's a place for them, but they need to be regulated like every other animal. And I just feel they haven't been. It's gotten way out of control. Our wolf season should have started 10 years ago.
It was my interpretation that the states were not thrilled about having wolves back in Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. It's kind of like, why did you pick our state? Why do we have to live with them? You know, if they got to be in our state, why don't you put them in Central Park in New York? So there was a judgment early on that this is unfair, and I had a lot of people tell me, you know, we don't really care for wolves.
The delisting of wolves from the Endangered Species Act was based on a criteria that was agreed upon, based on the best available science at the time the recovery plan was made, and that called for a minimum of 300 wolves in the Rocky Mountain states for 3 consecutive years, or roughly 10 breeding pairs for each state. We achieved that in 2002.
300 wolves, is that a viable wolf population? It's probably a minimum number of wolves to have a viable wolf population. Something higher was reasonable to assume, but then the U.S. public, all the different NGO groups, conservation groups, everyone had a different vision of how many wolves we needed. And many people felt that, well, 2,000 wolves in the Northern Rockies will eventually lead to dispersal into all of the Rocky Mountain West that have the habitat and the food base to feed them. The delisting, I think, was less than thrilling to a lot of folks when it meant that we were going to eventually start hunting and trapping them. The delisting was kind of unorthodox compared to delisting most species, where you know, the agencies get to the point where they decide we have enough. Here, Congress decided that they would intervene through a budget rider and delist the wolves. It left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth.
Removal of wolves from the federal endangered species list was done very poorly.
It shouldn't have happened.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was supposed to ensure a viable population of wolves would remain on the landscape, and they refused to do that, and they stuck with the original recovery target per state, so about 300 wolves in the entire Northern Rockies, which is pretty much nothing.
There was no doubt a lot of controversy over wolves and a lot of concern, but wildlife management is supposed to be based in science, not politics. I think the Obama administration responded to the politics of the situation. Never before had a Secretary of the Interior taken a step to undermine the Endangered Species Act like this and supported the political removal of a species from the Endangered Species Act.
There's such a long history of hostility towards wolves. I think it was a big problem that wolves were not on the landscape for a few generations, since about the 1930s. That's caused a lot of problems. The hunting industry grew and it was boom times for the hunters, but that was somewhat illusionary because we didn't have all the predators keeping in check those ungulate populations. So I think there's a lot of hostility because the folks who are alive now, their families didn't have to grow up dealing with wolves. So all of a sudden wolves are on the landscape. There's really no right answer to the right number of wolves. What we need to do is be more proactive in solving problems that are perceived by ranchers and also hunters so that we can maintain the ecological impacts of wolves on the ground.
A predominant question we have is, what are the ecosystem impacts of wolves? Predation is a predominant force in ecology and evolution. Through predation, you can not only impact the prey species, but it can trickle down to other aspects of the food web, even down to vegetation. In the absence of wolves, the elk herd got to such high densities that we did see significant impacts on the range quality, you know, the grasslands, as well as some of the woody browse like willow and aspen and cottonwood. And now that wolves are back, we're trying to understand some of the areas of the park, particularly here on the northern range, are starting to grow back. And that is important for other species such as songbirds and beavers and other aspects of the ecosystem. If wolf populations get too low, we are concerned, us biologists, for connectivity between the recovery areas and the subpopulations. For long-term genetic health, we can't have our populations get too small. The states do acknowledge that carnivores play a role on these landscapes. And yes, it's a different situation where you have livestock and there will be conflict. And I think that's where the states go in their management goals, is to find and strike a balance between the needs of healthy ecosystems and the values of their constituents, which are hunters and livestock producers. But there's also constituents which are wildlife enthusiasts that want wild nature, not just stuck in small national parks throughout the country, but more wide scale.
Our main business at the wild site is to take people into the park, Yellowstone visitors, so we often get hired by people that specifically want to see a wolf in the wild. We look at the livelihood debate a little differently because we do feel like there's such a big economy based around the wolf, and that there's a lot of us trying to make our livelihood with the wolves too. So it isn't just the livestock producer's livelihood or the elk hunting outfitter's livelihood that we're talking about in this Western wolf debate. There's a lot of tourism livelihoods that are at stake here too. One former University of Montana economist did surveying of Yellowstone visitors right in the park and compiled his data, which suggested they're spending, he estimated, somewhere on the order of $35 million every year in the communities around Yellowstone to do this. So it's a significant impact for our economy to have these animals back and people coming to us to see them.
We never had the expectation that Yellowstone wolves would be always protected. We accept and understand that when they leave our park, they fall into a different situation. And that's part of our understanding, is we now have data on what happens when wolves leave a protected place like Yellowstone. We lost, over the last month, 7 Yellowstone Park wolves that spend predominantly the most of their lives in the park. You know, wolves don't recognize political boundaries, and so when they leave park boundaries, maybe only for a day or two of the entire year, they're subject to the management jurisdiction of that land, which is the state agencies. So they were legally taken during the hunt. And particularly, we lost a very famous wolf. Many argue that she's the most famous wolf in the world, and millions of visitors have seen 832. She's also known as the 06 female because she was born in 2006. She was an extraordinary wolf. She was particularly beautiful. She was one of the best hunters we've ever really seen. She would sometimes take down elk by herself. She was actually taken 15 miles out of the park by a hunter. This is a pack that is used to seeing thousands of people throughout the year and probably quite naive to humans and tolerant of humans being close by. And so, you know, she was at a disadvantage in a landscape where wolves are being hunted.
I think what's happening to Yellowstone wolves just really highlights what's happening throughout the region. I mean, those are the most protected and well-managed wolves in the whole region, and they're still getting shot. Imagine what's going on happening to wolves throughout the rest of the region where they have few to no protections. I mean, you have 20-pound wolf pups getting shot in Idaho. In Wyoming, you know, most of Wyoming, you can go onto a bunch of your national forest lands. You could trap and snare wolves. You can kill wolves however you want. This has all been signed off on by the Department of Interior, the state of Wyoming.
A lot of the big fans of Yellowstone wolves are following the lives of the actual individuals. They are the attraction. These become the stars of our show. So without them, like, oh wow. And to have them hunted is even harder for our guests to understand. It could influence their decision about visiting the park in the future.
Bow hunting and just hunting in general are both extremely important to people in Montana. It's interwoven into the traditions that we observe, the pathways of our daily life throughout the year. It's something that we zealously protect. Hunting is very important, a very important way in which to put food on the table for many, many families. A good-sized elk can feed a family of 4 or more if it's a larger elk throughout the year. That's been the traditional way in Montana for, decades and centuries, to be sure. So as the animal's coming in, there are 1,000 things going through your head. So you have to think, okay, I have to get back all the way, full draw, everything taut. Look at the one spot I want to hit. Hold, here comes the vitals out from behind the tree. Hold, go. Wolves have had an interesting impact to the prey and predator relationship in Montana. They've had an additive effect to the other predation that's gone on. In recent years, we've also seen mountain lion populations, grizzly bear populations, black bear populations also on the rise. And so with the addition of the wolf, it has made some pretty significant decreases in numbers of certain animals. It's making it just a little bit harder in order to bring meat to the table. There was certainly frustration as part of that reintroduction. It did feel as if we had to go along for the ride for a while, willingly or not. But now, since the hunts have started up, now we've regained that sense of empowerment, you know, self-sufficiency, involvement in the process. That's really important for us as a state that has the hunting traditions that we have.
I get thousands of emails per year castigating me as a terrible human being because we allow hunting of wolves in Montana. Now remember, we have in Montana some of the healthiest wildlife species on the planet, and somehow our wildlife managers are able to manage those species in a way that maintains the numbers and keeps them completely healthy, and we have for generations. And yet, the folks in Washington, D.C. said, well, yeah, you're really good at managing wildlife, but we will decide what we do with wolves. And we're saying, but wolves are a tool in the toolbox in terms of managing all of these other species, and we need to manage all of them together. Give us the tools so that those livestock people out there, if there is a wolf that's attacking their livestock, they can shoot them.
Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer, he told Reuters, quote, "If there's a dang wolf in your corral attacking a pregnant cow, shoot that wolf. And if its pals are in the corral, shoot them too."
Well, the media is definitely guilty of keeping it polarized.
Animal lovers, this is a call to action you are hearing from me right now. Once again, our tax dollars are being turned against innocent animals. This time, the state of Wyoming could declare war on wolves.
Killing wolves, whether we're hunting them, trapping them, or removing a problem wolf periodically, it really shouldn't be news anymore. We don't announce every time someone shoots a coyote or someone kills a mountain lion or a bear. Wolves are not weapons of mass destruction. They're just another critter out on the landscape trying to make a living and doing what God put them here for.
Why aren't the middle ground voices heard is a good question. I think that there's a lot of drama associated with the conflict. The story we have to tell about trying to live with wolves is far more complicated than one about, you know, don't kill any wolves or kill all the wolves.
It's incredibly frustrating because there really aren't very good data on what the grassroots individual ranchers feel. All we really read about in the newspapers is what the mouthpieces say to the media. And I think it's a gross oversimplification of what's really happening out on the landscape. When Dave and I first started ranching here, very soon after we got sheep, we lost a few to coyotes. And at first we did what everybody does. We called up the government trapper, and he came in and he shot one and he snared one. And it didn't take us very long to look at each other and say, you know, if we have to exterminate all the native species to do this, then we probably shouldn't be ranching. Part of what makes this region special is not just the beautiful views, but the whole biological system that makes this work. And we kind of feel like it's our obligation to figure out how to coexist. People are very frustrated by the way the reintroduction occurred. And in recent years, I think the frustration has increased in many respects because of the way some of the mainstream environmental groups have handled all the legal battles surrounding the delisting of wolves. Because after the initial semi-panic about wolf reintroduction, there was a period of several years where things simmered down, people began to learn, people began to get curious and kind of fascinated by this whole phenomenon. But then, when the battles really heated up about delisting, there was a lot of backlash and a lot of backsliding, and that's what we're in the middle of right now, I think. Predator Friendly is a certification. Basically, it's a group of ranchers who have committed not to kill native carnivores in order to protect their sheep. And it started in the early to mid-90s. We began with blankets and then later started working on mittens and hats and sweaters and smaller knitted products. It's been a way for both producers and consumers to learn about both the risks and the rewards of trying to ranch in an environment where we care about the environment. You know, ranchers aren't going to run around and embrace this idea and embrace wolves, but I think we all feel like this is a work in progress, and it's going to take decades to really get good at it. But there are people who are making real progress.
You can tell with the cattle if the wolves have been around, and they act a lot different. The wolf belongs back up in the mountain, and if he stays up there, I have no problem with him, but he's down here harassing my livestock. We need to be able to manage that.
You're talking about your livelihood.
Raising cattle, your paychecks are once or twice a year, and this is what you make your living off of. So it's just like anything else. Somebody comes into your business and takes a piece of that away, well, you're pretty aggressive in trying to control that or keep that from happening.
My name's Seth Wilson. I'm a conservation biologist, and I work with the Blackfoot Challenge, which is a landowner-driven watershed group. We act as the forum for bringing people together who normally wouldn't potentially even talk to one another to the same table, to put some of our differences aside so that we can face these incredibly challenging issues. By 2006, we had our first wolf pack documented in the Blackfoot. It's called the Elevation Mountain Pack.
Most of the time, though, you come right down these draws, these two big draws here. Once they started preying on the livestock, we had to eliminate the pack because there was no getting them to stop. And even at that time of year, there was a large elk herd, and they were going right by the elk herd to come into the cattle.
From 2006 to 2012 today, we've gone from one wolf pack to about 8 to 10. And that's forced us to bring the community together to think about how we adapt.
You know, when wolves got reintroduced in Montana, I think we were all a little bit nervous about what that meant to us. And so the great part is organizations like Blackfoot Challenge and people like Seth Wilson that have sort of engaged us in this process. This type of flattery is something we use in our grazing program. The basic premise is that when this is flapping in the breeze, whether it's the color, the ribbons, it's something that the wolves aren't comfortable with, so it makes them a little bit nervous. So if there are wolves around our cattle, we can use this product, and then again, we use it a lot while we're calving. If a neighboring ranch has a problem with wolves, we can load this machine up and go down and we can deploy, a mile or two of this product in short of an hour. And so it's very flexible. We've seen it work.
We remove livestock carcasses from about 40 ranches every spring so that we don't put the welcome mat out in the first place for bears and wolves. The other key program we have is our Range Rider program. Now we have 5 people on our Range Rider team who spend 6 months in the field radio tracking wolves and communicating every week to the ranching community where wolves are in relationship to their livestock. We put all that together and we have seen a decrease in our livestock losses to wolves. We're losing about 3.2 livestock, that's per year, with about 40 ranches involved. And so that's fairly low. When you compare our work to other valleys in Montana where there's very little mitigation efforts, there have been significant losses. What we really need to do is scale this up. This can be done. You need the resources, the science, and the collaboration, and above all, you need the landowners and ranchers who live with these large carnivores. They have to be willing to try this.
I'm not elated that the wolves are here, but now with the Blackfoot Challenge, I'm going to be able to live with them.
If my son's going to manage the ranch, he needs all these tools. It's the people that like wolves on the ground eat our beef. So we have to think about that. That's got to be good for us and the critters that are out there.
I think that we've lost sight that a lot of this isn't about wolves, it's about people.
It can seem like a paradox and a contradiction to want to, at the same time, appreciate the wildness of the wolf, while at the same time feeling the need to control it.
With something like a wolf, you'll never make everyone happy, and so we got to try to find some way to listen to everyone's interests and core values and accommodate them to the best of our ability.
If we could figure out how to crack this nut, we could solve a lot of other problems in our modern society.
It's a lot of work. Collaboration it can be messy. You can't get there tomorrow.
And there's people who greatly value wilderness and the symbols that bears and wolves have for them. And there's values at play regarding productive lands and the utility bringing people together to be able to respect those different values has been really key.
It may be late, too late to ever know. So sad today, watching the river flow.
U.S. airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.